This video contains spoilers for Hades and Hades 2. I'm Big Bear Nose, and Hades 2 is Supergiant's first ever sequel, and it more than delivers on providing more of what people loved about the first game, as well as expanding upon gameplay and world building to create a whole new experience that doesn't require any prior knowledge. Nonetheless, to understand how Hades 2 improves upon Hades, we must understand the original game's iconic gameplay loop that made it a heavy hitter in the roguelite genre. After speaking to characters in the House of Hades and interacting with the Mirror of Night in Zagreus' bedroom, you fight your way through 4 locations broken down into encounters. You must fight a few waves of enemies unique to that location and earn a reward. Rewards are typically boons, or level ups for boons, that will power Zagreus up and aid in the battles ahead, or items that contribute towards progression outside of the single run. Occasionally, those encounters will be broken apart by rooms where Zagreus can interact with NPCs, or shops run by Charon where Zagreus can purchase items. At the end of a series of encounters, you'll face the boss of that location, and if you manage to defeat them, you'll proceed to the next location. Tartarus, Asphodel, Elysium, and finally the Temple of Styx. The Temple of Styx provides a reprieve from the usual chain of encounters by presenting the player with a choice of rooms to enter, only allowing the player to proceed once they find the Satyr Sack, needed to distract Cerberus long enough to slip by to challenge the final boss, Hades himself. After defeating Hades, or dying trying, Zagreus returns to the House of Hades and the loop begins again. Interact with characters, prepare yourself for the journey ahead, and fight, all while a narrative surrounding Zagreus attempting to reunite with his lost mother Persephone unfolds before you. It's a solid, tight gameplay loop that can be spiced up in both small and large ways to keep things fresh and interesting. But for me personally, not long enough to keep me playing for more than a couple dozen hours at a time before needing to put it down for a few months. I loved Hades, having poured almost 100 hours into it and having 100%ed it. However, the repetitiveness of going through the same routes over and over would wear me down repeatedly until I returned to it enough times to complete it entirely, despite the game's attempts to avoid it. Hades 2 does something genius to combat this, which allowed me to pour well over 100 hours into the game in a span of a single month, adding a second route. The story scales up largely from the first game's very personal quest of a prince searching for his mother. Hades 2 begins several years after the events of the first game, following new protagonist Melinoe, the daughter of Hades, as she charts her course through the underworld to defeat the Titan of Time, Kronos, who has imprisoned the members of the House of Hades, including Zagreus, and opened the gates of the underworld to allow the dead to roam free, while his legions, along with the god of all monsters Typhon, siege Mount Olympus in an attempt to topple the family that sealed him away long ago. Melinoe is aided by her family via boons, sent directly from Mount Olympus, but she fights under the banner of the Silver Sisters, a group of gods and witches who call the Crossroads their home, and it's from here that she must choose each night whether to head down into the underworld and confront Time himself, or head up onto the surface to fight a monstrosity even Time could not control. The underworld is the first route you'll have access to in Hades 2. Turning the first game's escape from the underworld on its head as you descend down towards the House of Hades through secret passages in order to avoid detection by Kronos. Erebus and Oceanus provide the classic formula of running or dropping through small rooms with enemies to fight and rewards to choose from, with some brand new enemies and some recognizable variants from the first game. Erebus radiates a feeling of being close to home, between its witchy green aesthetic in line with the Crossroads, and its no lack of friends who can be encountered along the way and offer a helping hand, all culminating in the game's first boss, Melinoe's mentor and mother figure, Mistress Hecate. The feeling of stepping into the clearing to face her for the first time evokes that same feeling you felt in the first game when you stepped out of the doors of the underworld and discovered you had to fight Hades himself to clear your run. But here, the fight goes on. The aquatic region Oceanus takes the role Elysium held in the first game as my least favorite region, with a lot of potential frustration between enemies and traps that can be downright deadly at higher fear levels, but pushing through is worth it to get the Scylla and the Sirens, one of the most enjoyable boss battles in the game, as you fight the band hired by Kronos to get in Melinoe's way, set to their own music ripe with enemies to lovers potential.
You look at me with bewitching eyes.
Following these two cookie-cutter regions, we're provided with some variation as the map around us is opened up in the Fields of Mourning, allowing you to spread your wings and run around gathering various rewards, some larger rewards mandatory to proceed, and some smaller rewards optional, while dodging the strewn-about enemies. Every Hades player remembers the fear of reaching the Temple of Styx for the first time and expecting to have to fight Cerberus, before being relieved to find out he can be placated with the Satyr Sack. Unfortunately, there is no slipping by him in Hades 2, as the precious perp has been corrupted by Kronos and is hell-bent on destroying you. And finally, there's Tartarus, the only returning region from the first game. I greatly enjoyed the reversal of Tartarus being the first region you fought through in Hades, to now being the final region you fight through in Hades 2. The black and gold colors of Kronos permeates through this renewed Tartarus, and that aesthetic paired with the gold wraiths and hourglasses you fight throughout the region make it abundantly clear that as much as Erebus belongs to Melinoi, Hecate and the Silver Sisters, Tartarus belongs to Kronos. As you make your way through this final region, each room counting down, Melinoi's role as an agent of change rises to the surface. She has a duty and she will stop at nothing to see it done. And upon finally reaching Kronos, she does not mince words, except to prevent Kronos from learning where she begins each night and whom she serves. This final boss battle does not disappoint. Kronos is a heavy hitter, with 2 phases that require a handful of runs to master. And should you survive this difficult battle, you are rewarded with progressing the narrative, as Melinoi seeks to loop Zagreus from the past into her plans in the present to stop Kronos regenerating night after night for good, and to reclaim the House of Hades. Naturally, a narrative revolving around fighting the Titan of Time is going to make use of some time travel tropes, and as a huge fan of time travel stories, I am not complaining. This leads into the second route, the Surface. The key to defeating Kronos lies within the very monster he awakened. After receiving their boons throughout countless underworld runs, Melinoi must now aid the Olympians in return, as Typhon, god of all monsters, rages atop Mount Olympus, and the reagents received from his remains are a necessary ingredient in the incantation to undo Kronos. The path to the surface won't be as easy as the path below, however, as even after Melinoi casts an incantation to allow herself to remain on the surface for a long period of time, something her bloodline is otherwise unable to do, she must battle through 4 more challenging regions. The city of Ephyra, once inhabited by mortals, has been overrun by the dead and Kronos' forces, not totally dissimilar from the Temple of Styx. You may choose between several rooms, each with their own rewards, while you break down the barrier preventing you from proceeding to the region's boss, and may earn smaller rewards from the buildings within. This region helps provide a distinction from the underworld route, as, while still bound by the random choices the game offers you, you have a little more control over Melinoi's build from the start. After defeating the infamous Cyclops Polyphemus, who provides a fun and relatively easy boss battle given that he can't see, as long as you know how to dodge those AoEs, you move on to the Rift of Thessaly, another aquatic-themed route. In parallel with the underworld route, but this time on board the ghost ships that make up the naval siege of Mount Olympus. The Rift of Thessaly once again breaks away from what you expect out of a typical Hades region, with encounters in maps that skew long rather than wide, and often reusing the same ship for several encounters. Should you survive the ocean, you'll meet Erebus, one of the many children of Nyx, wielding a weapon you may be all too familiar with if you played the first game, and who, much like Scylla and the Sirens, is made for the enemies to live as livers in the audience. Unlike most of the bosses who wear their loyalty to Kronos on their sleeve, Eris's motivations are unclear until you develop your relationship with her back at the crossroads. And should you come to understand her, or even romance her, she won't go easy on you. She is, of course, the embodiment of strife, and strife is exactly what fuels her, even with the one she may love, even if it means getting in the way of her one and only purpose. The third surface route region is the legendary Mount Olympus, and Melinoi must work her way through or up to the summit as she battles through forces of Kronos and Olympus alike. The gates to the summit are guarded by Prometheus, the Titan of Foresight, A fun boss, Eagle aside, who has a really interesting arc, revealing himself not to be trying to stop you in the name of Kronos, but to be enabling your path to succeed in the name of mortal kind. He knows you'll beat him, and when you do, he knows you'll have to face something far worse than him. The summit is the final surface region, and without a doubt the most difficult in the game, with mini-bosses that feel stronger than the underworld bosses, and a final boss so powerful that you can't even see his health bar. The summit captures the horror of Typhon, king of all monsters, perfectly. He is beyond anything Molinoi has faced. He is an eldritch horror out of a Lovecraftian novel, and the epic score and aesthetic of this region only elevate the feeling of dread felt as you approach the final battle. Much like Kronos, Typhon has two phases and can unleash some devastating attacks. Once you get the hang of Kronos, he can be defeated without much of a build at all, but it will be much more difficult to take Typhon down without some good boons. Upon defeating Typhon, Molinoi gets to witness something that Zagreus never did: the beauty and splendor of the Palace of Zeus, a shining fortress that lives up to the Greek god's reputation. A shining fortress that is somewhat devoid of life, a sign of the gods being stretched thin by Kronos' legion, or a sign that the gods are simply way past their heyday. At its core, Hades 2, much like its predecessor, is a game about family. Molinoi was raised with the singular purpose: to take down Kronos in order to restore the House of Hades and reunite with her parents and brother, something that she yearns for deeply. She finds family in those who raised her and supported her, the Silver Sisters, Apollo, and Hermes, even rejoicing as the big scary gods and goddesses like Zeus and Demeter welcome her into the family. She's more nervous facing Zagreus for the first time than she was fighting Kronos for the first time. After all, one she had trained all her life for, and the other had felt unattainable until that moment. Friends, family, and foes give Molinoi prior warning that the Olympians can be difficult, aren't to be trusted, and can inflict terrible trauma. While she puts the mission before all else, these warnings do not discourage Molinoi. Should not be surprising then that the main story of Hades 2 resolves itself very much in line with this theme of accepting family, flaws and all. Zagreus, who spent much of the first game trying to escape the grasp of his own father to reunite with his mother, before succumbing to the possibility of a happy family, finds Kronos in the past and does what Molinoi could not do alone: changes time. By showing him the perspective that he would spend much of his future living in bitterness, only to be undone by a granddaughter who never directly wronged him, unless he took this opportunity to break the cycle. The Kronos in this timeline gives Zagreus' idea a shot, is accepted back into his family, and the love he feels is enough to break Kronos in the present timeline out of his rage, and enough for him to let go of his vendetta towards his children. The events of the original timeline where Kronos imprisoned Molinoi's family still occurred, but as his, along with the main character's memories, are influenced by echoes of the new past, Kronos makes the decision to seek redemption, returning Molinoi's family to her, and working alongside Molinoi and the Olympians to defeat versions of himself and Typhon in other timelines, in order to ensure time continues to flow normally. It's exactly the kind of logic you expect from the ending of a time travel story. Difficult to wrap your head around, but makes enough sense and allows the gameplay loop to be preserved, which was always going to be necessary given that this is a roguelite. While I do feel for folks that were disappointed that Molinoi didn't agree with Kronos' plight and lead a revolution against the Olympians, changing the path of their world and transforming the game itself, given that yes, the Olympians are stuffy royals who are stuck in their ways and have mistreated mortals for far too long, and that the trope of blood is thicker than water is somewhat outdated in our world where we acknowledge it's okay to cast out family members who have caused significant harm, we also have to keep in mind that Molinoi is not in our world, nor is she entirely mortal. She is a goddess, one raised around other gods and goddesses, titans, and legendary shades. It was always Molinoi's fate to restore the House of Hades. As the epilogue reveals, however, Melinoe's actions do contribute towards the ushering in of a new age, as the Fates step back from their duties and the Olympians are prophesied to do the same, something Prometheus knew all along. The Age of Mortals is mere millennia away. Hades 2 provides plenty to do outside of its main story. One of the big positive impressions people had about the first game was the relationship management system. Between and throughout runs, you could interact with characters to learn more about them and their personal history, gift them nectar to receive an equipable keepsake with unique abilities, as well as unlock new dialogue, and in the cases of a few characters, initiate a romance with them. This system also tied into side stories, usually involving a small group of characters that could progress by developing a strong relationship with each of the involved characters. This system is expanded in Hades 2. No longer are you limited to just gifting nectar and ambrosia, but for characters found at the crossroads, you also have the ability to gift bath salts and twin lures. These new items, along with ambrosia, must be used at certain points in Melinoe's relationship with a character to continue raising affinity, and when used, allows Melinoe to experience unique events with the character at the crossroads, such as hanging out at the taverna, fishing together at the fishing pier, or relaxing in the hot springs. I loved this addition, because finally we're able to bond with the characters through activities instead of just plain old dialogue. We're able to see the characters in different social contexts, which provides opportunities to more easily see different sides of them, letting loose while getting drunk on ambrosia, opening up while flirting in the hot springs, and usually advice or guidance at the fishing pier. Hades 2 has 4 romanceable characters: Nemesis, Eris, Icarus, and Moros. Eris is closer to the characters I usually find myself attached to, but I had Melinoe romance Nemesis because their rivalry was electric, and to resolve the tension between them with romance was very satisfying. Each character in Hades 2, be it friend or foe, has hundreds of lines of dialogue to cycle through, meaning even after 100 runs, you'll likely never hear them say the same thing twice. This is both a blessing and a curse, as you'll often be waiting on a character to address a certain issue in order to progress one of the side stories, but may have to wait several runs for the dialogue you need, especially so after completing the main story, when dialogue about the game's ending seems to be prioritized over everything else. If you mastered Hades, you'll have a significantly easier time with the combat of Hades 2. While Melinoe's movesets and weapons are quite different to Zagreus', the movement and controls offer something familiar. Much like the first game, there are a handful of weapon choices within the game, and enough weapon aspects to keep you busy mastering all of them for years to come. I personally found myself gravitating towards the Skura, the Witch's Staff, Zoraphet, the Moonstone Axe, and Raval, the Argent Skull. Those 3 nocturnal arms gave me some of my most successful runs. The Black Coat and Umbral Flames, on the other hand, were hands down my least favorite. If you speak to somebody else who's played Hades 2, they will give you completely different opinions, which speaks to the amount of effort that was put into the game's combat system. No weapons feel unbalanced or unfair, and despite several aspects having completely different movesets, the combat always feels smooth and clean. Different weapons and aspects just suit different playstyles, and that is fun. Hades 2 is a roguelite as opposed to a roguelike, meaning that there is progression between each loop of the game outside of just the continuing narrative. Resources can be gathered throughout loops, which, among other things, allow weapon aspects to be upgraded and can be used as materials in incantations that give Melinoe an easier time on her journey. For example, by adding Wells of Charon after bosses, random fountains that heal a certain amount of health, or unlock whole new features. Using Ashes and Psyche, Arcana cards can be activated, unveiled, and upgraded at the Altar of Ashes, which provide more direct upgrades to Melinoe's stats and blessing. Only as many cards can be activated as will fill Melinoe's grasp, allowing again for totally different playstyles depending on the cards chosen. Resource gathering for incantations and upgrades, as in all games, can be a grind. However, by making use of the game's familiars, you can ensure spawn rates for certain resources are increased, and with the game's Forget-Me-Not system, you can ensure you don't miss a needed resource during a run. These are 2 quality of life features I really appreciated. Familiars are little pets who are unlocked throughout the game and have abilities in battle along with those resource gathering bonuses. You will also eventually unlock the ability to customize them, which is incredibly cute. Tula's extra life saved me on several occasions, as did Garle's ability to block a certain number of attacks, and Hecuba is a godsend when using Deskura and relying on the Omega attacks that require a lot of magic. Keepsakes received from allies also help to provide some variety, some increasing the chances of certain Olympians' boons appearing, and some having unique effects such as providing an additional life, higher chance for crit damage but limited life, random weapon upgrades every X number of encounters, or extra damage for attacks from behind. Truly, there are an endless number of combinations of weapons, weapon aspects, arcana cards, keepsakes, and familiars to choose from. And having 2 different possible routes to take them on provides an endless and impressive amount of variety. If, like me, however, you have a tendency to get too comfortable with a specific loadout and roguelites, Hades 2 has one last trick up its sleeve: Chaos Trials. A feature that, in most games in 2025, would have likely been cut out to sell as DLC, Chaos Trials offer an arcade-like mode, with challenges that require completing a specific region with a loadout and boons specific to that challenge. These can range from being incredibly fun and easy, to tearing your hair out difficult. Another perfect way to get out of your comfort zone and try new things without the commitment of a full run. Once you've unlocked every weapon aspect, keepsake, and familiar there is to unlock, you'll also gain access to a built-in randomizer through Chaos Above and Below. 2 Chaos Trials which allow you to tackle a full surface or underworld run with a completely random loadout, with variants for both lower and higher difficulties. This is a truly wonderful addition. There is so much more that could be said about what Hades 2 does right. Between its sphere system for custom difficulty, its no shortage of challenges for 100%ers, its many secrets, and its clear understanding of what people want out of a game at this moment in time. While its story may not always reach the heights of its predecessor, the gameplay is vastly improved and not expanded to the point of bloat. I've played many a great game in 2025, and one game managed to rise above them all against all odds. Hades 2 is my game of the bear.